Indian polity. Indian Councils Act of 1892. The Indian Councils Act of 1892, also known as the Morley Minto Reforms, was an important legislative measure during the British Raj in India. It was introduced by the then Secretary of State for India, Lord Morley, and the Viceroy of India, Lord Minto. The Act aimed to introduce limited political reforms in response to growing demands for Indian representation in the legislative process. It expanded the legislative councils and provided some Indians with opportunities to participate in the governance of British India. Here are the key provisions of the Indian Councils Act of 1892. Expanded legislative councils. The Act increased the number of members in the Central Legislative Council and the Provincial Legislative Councils. It allowed for the inclusion of more non-official members who were not part of the British administration. Introduction of separate electorates. The Act introduced the concept of separate electorates based on religion. It provided for communal representation, whereby Muslims and other minority communities were allowed to elect their own representatives. Indirect elections. The majority of members in the expanded legislative councils were still appointed rather than directly elected. The officials and nominated members continued to hold significant power and influence in the legislative process. Limited franchise. The Act expanded the electorate, allowing more Indians to vote in the elections. However, the franchise was still restricted based on income, property, and education qualifications, which limited the participation of the majority of the Indian population. Advisory role. The legislative councils under the Act had an advisory role, and the final decision-making power rested with the Viceroy and the British government. The Indian Councils Act of 1892 was seen as a step towards limited political representation for Indians, but it fell short of the demands for full self-government and control over legislation. It set the stage for further reforms in the subsequent years, leading up to the Government of India Act of 1919, which introduced more significant changes in the governance of British India. Thank you.